The relationship between queerness and cinema has historically been complicated. Strict censorship that banned same-sex relationships on screen plagued the early 20th century film industries around the world. Only in recent years has the global movement towards gay rights and queer visibility slowly grown, as queer romance films have brought these stories to the mainstream. We are looking at two of these today: Call Me By Your Name, released in the United States in 2017, and Portrait of a Lady on Fire, released in France in 2019. Call Me By Your Name, directed by Luca Guadagnino and based on the novel of the same name, was released to great critical and commercial success, including a Best Picture Oscar nomination and a win for Best Adapted Screenplay. Set within the beautiful Italian countryside, it tells the love story of Elio, a 17-year-old pianist, and Oliver, the college student that comes to stay with Elio's family for the summer. The 2019 French film Portrait of a Lady on Fire, directed by Céline Sciamma, stars Naomi Merlant and Adèle Haenel. The film follows an 18th century painter, Marianne, and Eloise, a woman promised to a man she has never met, who refuses to sit for a wedding portrait. Her family hires Marianne to keep Eloise company and secretly memorize her face, so that she can paint the portrait Eloise won't sit for without her knowing. As time goes on, however, the truth comes out and the two women grow closer. They find solace in each other's intelligence and creative outlook, and ultimately fall in love. Narratively, these two films hold strong similarities. In both, the protagonists meet through their parents, begin a secret affair, and let the slow burn of romantic tension develop, before only getting together much later in the film. Also, despite both being period pieces, they are set in a kind of utopian oasis, away from the rest of the world. For Elio and Oliver, this oasis is the family's summer home in Italy. For Marianne and Eloise, they are isolated on an island in France, alone except for Eloise's mother and their maid Sophie. By remaining out of the direct gaze of a larger society, both couples can flourish. Thus, instead of the threat of homophobia, a common antagonist in gay films, what drives the plot of these stories is the struggle between queer love and the limits of a heteronormative society. Each director, one gay and one lesbian, quietly presents same-sex romance as something powerful and beautiful. In Call Me By Your Name, Luca Guadagnino uses cinematography to suggest the beauty of summer and, by extension, the beauty of love. He brings in many a shot of trees, lakes, rivers, and countryside, having the actors interact with the nature around them, whether that be splashing in water or playing with grass. The use of open framing connects his characters to the natural environment they are in. In its mise-en-scene, the film also explores sensuality. Characters indulge in soft-boiled eggs, peaches, and fruit juice, savoring every bite. They touch walls, railings, statues, and books, and although the movie is generally quiet, when sounds are present, they are crisp and vibrant. By connecting his characters to the world around them, Guadagnino creates an immersive experience that turns both them and the audience towards their deeper and more intuitive desires, encouraging the following of one's own heart rather than the expectations of society. In Portrait, director Céline Sciamma heavily utilized light to set the tone of this film, specifically the soft, low-key lighting that comes from fire, a symbol of passion and danger. For example, in the bonfire scene, soon before the two characters get together, Marianne and Eloise find themselves gazing at each other, the fire in between them lighting up their faces. The music of a crowd of singing women around them builds until Eloise's dress catches fire, and it stops, as if directly caused by the intense gaze for each other. She does not panic, but simply stands, refusing to look away from Marianne, letting her dress burn. This imagery is powerful, as Eloise lets the symbol of women's societal expectations burn and instead embraces the passion, the fire, of her affair with Marianne. Additionally, throughout the film, Marianne is haunted by the image of Eloise in her future wedding dress, the ultimate symbol of heteronormative society that will eventually lead to their tragic separation. When Marianne sees this vision, the lighting is tinted blue rather than orange, seeming unnatural and decidedly different looking from the light used in the romantic scenes, separating it from true passion, the true fire the film suggests love should share. Thematically, these films emphasize the importance of understanding and equality in a relationship, suggesting that love comes not from the filling of a societal role, but a true understanding of your partner. This is exemplified best in the titular line, "Call me by your name and I'll call you by mine," an erotic yet tender moment between Elio and Oliver before they sleep together for the first time. It suggests a sense of putting yourself in your partner's shoes, trying to understand them as you would yourself, allowing yourself to let go of fear and fall completely in love with someone. This line, part of which acts as the movie's title, is foreshadowed heavily throughout the film. When the two characters are introduced,
Elio, Oliver, Elio. How you doing?
And in the little lines like "my room is now your room" that suggest a sense of shared experience. Portrait of a Lady on Fire does something very similar, building understanding through the idea of the mutual gaze. In the scene where Marianne paints Eloise's portrait, she comments she would hate to be in Eloise's position, sitting, being looked at, and being painted. But Eloise quickly replies that they are in exactly the same position.
Regardez, Si vous me regardez, qui je regarde moi?
At this moment, the audience begins to see not just Marianne's point of view, but the point of view of Eloise as well, watching Marianne as she paints. The theme of the mutual gaze the two characters share, watching each other as the camera builds tension, sees a person through the eyes of empathy, understanding, and curiosity, rather than expectations and judgment. Sciamma reflected in a recent interview. The narrative of the film is based on equality among the love story because there is no gender domination. Embodying equality in a love dialogue could be a wake-up call for a lot of persons, and the film is about that mutual gazing. In both films, characters dive headfirst into any art they have available to them, embracing the freedom and imagination it grants them. In Call Me By Your Name, characters discuss the history and sensual nature of Greek sculptures. The award-winning song, Mystery of Love, that plays up near the end of the film, includes several allusions to queer historical figures. Guadagnino worked with the American singer Sufjan Stevens to craft this tender soundtrack filled with yearning, building emotion, and the will-they-won't-they tension. Every time the absence of Oliver is on screen, this music comes off a bit like longing. Not only a longing of Elio for Oliver, but a longing of the space for Oliver, and a longing of the movie for Oliver. In Portrait, Marianne, Eloise, and Sophie read aloud the tragic story of lovers Orpheus and Eurydice, putting a feminist spin on the myth. They suggest instead of Orpheus turning around out of doubt, Eurydice told him to, condemning herself to the underworld and choosing death over love. This is paralleled later after the portrait is finished and Marianne is leaving. When she sees Eloise in her wedding dress, she is overwhelmed and rushes out, but she pauses at the doorway when Eloise calls her to turn around. She briefly does so and sees her love once again in that dress. Eloise, having condemned herself to a life of marriage and conformity to social expectations, choosing in her own way, death over love. Diegetic music is used to connect this as well. In one scene, Elio, who is constantly playing and transcribing music throughout the film, plays a Bach piece for Oliver, but in several different ways. First on guitar, then shaped to match Liszt's style, then again to match Busoni's, and finally back again to the way Bach originally wrote it. The two characters sit and listen, sharing the musical experience as a form of creative expression that comes from the heart. Marianne similarly plays the harpsichord in Portrait, playing Vivaldi's Summer from the Four Seasons for Eloise, who has never heard an orchestra. Marianne comments that the piece is not merry, but it is lively, that it is like a coming storm. The song creates a parallel to the affair they soon begin, coming back at the end of the film, the last time Eloise and Marianne see each other, watching an orchestra in Milan. Vivaldi's intense, passionate score plays, and the camera holds on Eloise for the last 2 minutes of the film in one continuous shot that slowly pushes in. She listens and weeps, recollecting all that is lost, until the screen cuts to black, the film complete. Despite the beauty of love of each couple, their joy is temporary. In Portrait of a Lady on Fire, after the portrait is made, Eloise leaves and gets married, and Marianne goes back to teaching painting in Paris. In Call Me By Your Name, Oliver leaves at the end of the summer and eventually, later that year, gets married too. The person that the protagonist spends the entire movie falling in love with eventually succumbs to the expectations of the heteronormative society they have been born into. Despite the immense amount of similarity between these two movies, from narrative structures to themes and symbols, the main contrast between them comes from their directors and their intent politically. Both France and the US have made great strides towards the acceptance of queer people in the last 30 years, including the legalization of gay marriage, but the political landscape of each is still tainted by the remaining presence of homophobia. France itself decriminalized homosexuality very early, back in 1791, but as the government has expressed even today, homophobia has deep roots in French society. In 2018, the reported number of homophobic attacks grew by 33%. With Portrait, Celine Sciamma, a feminist and gay rights activist herself, was very clear. That's why it's so important to tell stories. It's to represent us, and the film is about that mutual gazing, but it politically involves much more. She wanted to highlight the importance of representing queer people on film. In contrast, Guadagnino has been much more hesitant to jump to a political connection. Despite its clear themes present in Call Me By Your Name, he has denied it having any intentional political position, and rather felt the film should be read as a love story in general. In a way, the political aspect of the movie can be build bridges, don't build walls. In the US, the issue of LGBTQ+ rights has divided the country, and although more people identify as queer now than ever before, there are still many areas of the country where homosexual couples are treated much differently. Guadagnino's film does not point blame at any one institution or even society as a whole. It simply urges the audience to feel empathy for a gay love story and see it as no different than any other. In his words, "We are made of flesh and blood and bones, and what is most fascinating is human beings interacting, with all their contradictions and failures and aims and wishes and bodily contact." And that is exactly what these films aim to present.